a world where we have everything and it's still not enough, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there's more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old push your way through and claim the deeper, more meaningful life that's calling you.
That's what we invite you to explore with us.
We're your hosts,
Stephanie Allen
and Maren and and this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Yay! Hi, welcome to the Soulful Leader Podcast. This is Stephanie, and I'm here with Maren. And the topic today is when you want something more for someone else and they actually may even want it for themselves. And how that just completely, it just wrecks us, doesn't it? It just, I've had experiences with that. I know you have too, Maren. And I'm sure some of the listeners have also had that. So
I'm not sure you can be alive. Right. I don't know if you can be alive and not have had that experience of wanting something more for somebody else than they want it for themselves. And you know what? One of the things that comes up for me when I think about that is a level of arrogance that we think we know better. And, you know, like this is full on personal experience of how arrogant am I to think that I know better for somebody than they know for themselves. And yet I do it all the time. Yeah.
Yes, we do. I often think, you know, I have a kind of a boundary that I have with and a boundary, by the way, is with myself. It's not so much with my clients, but I often will say, I cannot care more about someone's health and well-being more than they're willing to care about their own health and well-being. Because I know what's happened to me in the past. I become attached. And then I get really upset when they don't take the actions that I gave them, for God's sake, because I'm the be all and end all, right? Like I have all the arrogance. And, you know, I haven't made space to really listen to where they are in their life and what their needs are. And even sometimes when I have made that space and they've said, hey, this is what I want, then I get all excited for it. And I think I must be their personal cheerleader to keep them over that finish line. And sometimes they're just having a moment to reflect. They might need to hear it themselves, and they're not even recruiting me to be that cheerleader. So I just, it's a really interesting thing. And I have clients of mine who will say, you know, what they think is best for their child or what is best for their husband or their partner or whatever. And I'm like, oh, morning. This is going to be really uncomfortable for you.
You know,
because I've been there.
Yeah. From a leadership perspective, when I was running my studio, I did that a lot with my team members, with people that I hired. And, you know, I would get very invested in what they wanted. And I found that oftentimes I was more invested than they were. And again, you know, like I can look at it from the perspective of like, well, you know, they said they wanted that and they didn't do all the things. But again, I go back to the arrogance of like, that's my version of all the things. Like, you know, I that saying of like walk a mile in somebody else's shoes.
Yeah.
And we can't truly do that because we don't know everything that somebody else has been through.
And it's not my life. It's not my business.
And it's
you
not,
know, it's their business.
Yeah, they have their own conversation with life, with spirit, with the one who sent them, whatever that means to each of those people. And it's not, I mean, that's not for me to determine for them. And, you know, I did that a lot. And I loaned people money and ended up having to forgive loans because they just never were in a position to pay them back. And when I say I was invested, like literally money, heart, soul, the whole bit, like
more than they were.
Yeah. Personal cheerleader. Woo. Yeah, you want that? Let's go for it. And now you can even hear it like, let's go for it. Not how can I support you and you going for it. Right.
Yeah.
Big difference.
You know, there's a great definition of codependency because I that word just completely always baffles me for the most. I'm like, what does that really mean? Am I codependent? I probably am if I'm asking that question. and I look at that and you know, the definition from the 12-step programs are often, it's like a codependent is someone who actually is invested in someone else's well-being and is doing for them what they
Mm.
actually can do themselves. That is a codependent. And so you might be asking, so, well, if somebody doesn't have any money, why can't I lend them, like you were saying, Maren? Well, they don't have money to lend, to invest in the dream. Well, is that codependency? Well, it is if they're not showing up. If they're not participating in and showing up with it in the way that, and again, it becomes control. That's the
Mm.
whole codependency is actually control. It's like, when we give to someone, we're actually giving with conditions that they're going to change, or they're going to go for that dream, or they're going to, instead of just like backing off totally and saying, it's like that saying, I love that saying that says, you can teach a man, you can give a man a fish and he can eat for a day, or you can teach him how to fish and they'll eat for a lifetime.
Right.
And that's the difference. And I look at that as our soulful leadership is like, how do we back away from that codependency? How do we back away from that caring more about somebody else's well-being than they care about themselves? How do we back away from that and give them the space to actually find their own way?
I have a story from when I was in college with my dad, and he did that to me. So I went to college, started out pre-med, which dad was like, great. And my father paid for all of my college, which, what a blessing, right? Most people end up in debt coming out of college. And I knew that I was not going to be in debt coming out of college because dad was paying for it. And then I decided that I was not doing pre-med, and I became an art major.
Mm.
And my father called me and said, "You are not. I won't pay for your schooling then." And I said, "That's fine. I'll get And so I applied for financial aid. Little did I know that they actually had to contact my parents in order for me to get financial aid. So I got this livid phone call from my father. "You are not going on financial aid." And I was like, "Well, I'm either going on financial aid or you're going to pay for it and I'm going to be an artist. So one of the two is going to, it's like there is that control, right? So both of us, neither of us was going to back down." And bless my father, he he raised a very willful child, being me, because he was very willful, right? And so there's that codependency piece of he wanted to control what I did, and he had the power, right? Because he had the money.
Hmm.
Wonder where I got that. Now I'm going to help people with money and then think I'm going to,
Well, that's a good insight anyway. And I think that's all of us. We learn it and then we perpetuate it, don't we?
yeah, we do. Mm-hmm.
I had an interesting situation. Thank you for sharing for that, because I had an interesting situation actually just yesterday leading a yoga class. So here we all are in Shavasana, and we've just been working through, the inner dialogue with the critical parent and the child that is within all of us, and what we're talking about is that internal narrative. How we talk about ourselves is basically how our parents have talked to us. So like your story with your dad and going for your dreams and how that all unraveled, we then adopt it internally inside ourselves. So even long after we've left home, or our parents have left this earthly plane, we're still, grappling with that dialogue inside of us. So here we are in Shavasana, just working with the inner child and the critical parent, and it's quiet, it's still. And the yoga class is at the YMCA, so the windows border right on the parking lot. And for some reason, there was a little tiny crack in the window, so the window was open, and there was a mother bringing her young child to childcare. And on the way, you could hear this outwardly, this mother literally screaming at this child, "You're going to hold my hand. It's a parking lot. If you're not going to hold my hand, then we're going to go back home. Is that what you want?" And the child screaming, "No, I don't want to go." And it was back and forth. And I'm like, here we are in Shavasana. We're supposed to be in this peaceful, relaxed, kind of place. And I think half the class we all started laughing, because it's like, okay, we have just been working with that on how to let go of
Right.
that negative internal dialogue, that internal battle within. And here it is being displayed in the outer world. It's such a mirror. And when we're outside of it, when we're witnessing it, we can have a million different ways of approaching that situation. But when you're in it, you can't see it or hear it or feel it. And I think that's the key. And that's what I've started to learn for myself is like, what if when you're in that place of attachment with somebody else, the way you want them to be, or you are trying to do something for them and you're feeling just so torqued, if you can step outside of it for a moment and witness it. I tend to put myself and the other being on stage, and I pretend that I'm watching the whole thing, and then I redirect it. So
Yeah. I
yeah,
love that as an exercise. And I think one of the things that you said, which I just need to repeat real quickly, is that inner dialogue is not ours. We
right.
inherited it, right? It's our parents' voice or our teacher's voice or whatever voice that we have taken on for ourselves. And
Society's voice, everything
yeah,
we've ever learned, our voice
right.
that we've torqued it.
It's the conditioning. It's not
Hmm.
us. And so it allows us to be a little bit more graceful with ourselves when we realize that we are being torqued, or maybe we did
Right.
something we didn't want to do, or we're trying to control somebody. It's like, or be controlled. So yeah, I think in soulful leadership that's essential. Those are the skills for us as leaders. And when I say leaders, I'm talking about like somebody that can stand for themselves and for others. So it's also the internal leadership. How can you gracefully, beautifully talk to that part of yourself and say it's okay? Whether you're the one who's trying to do the controlling or the one who's that someone's trying to control you, and you're in
Hmm.
that codependence thing, right? Where
Yeah.
you want something more for somebody than they want for themselves, or there's somebody who wants something more for you than you want for yourself, right? It could be
Yeah.
either side of that.
And I think there's a way of being kind about it instead of like,
Mm,
I think of like, you're doing this to me, or good, bad, right, wrong. I like to, my practice, and I offer this all to you all out there listening to. If you want to make the practice of putting yourself in the audience and watching it as a movie and not judging it, not making it right or wrong or good or bad, and just saying, I wonder if there was another way to kind of go through that scene again. Or I wonder, like you said, if you walk a mile in someone else's shoes, I wonder what might be going through their mind,
mm,
or that person's, like on the other side, like, well, that child and that mother, like, to be able to separate yourself from it
mhm.
so that there's space for love. And then to be practicing non-reaction, because my god, that reaction creates a lot of inflammation and a lot of hostility. Both, like I said, you either implode or you explode.
Yeah. And we've all
So
experienced both of those
we
too.
all experience that.
Yeah.
So I
Excellent.
think it's a great challenge this week.
I do too. And that is your challenge for everyone out there listening is, maybe put yourself in the audience, give yourself a little bit of space, make yourself the witness instead of the judge, jury, and executioner, which we tend to
Right.
default to, right? So
See, it is a great epic movie.
I love that. Your life. There's on the headline on the marquee, right?
That's right. That's right. Like we all laughed in Shavasana at our yoga class, and we're like, "Wow, that's like God loved them, right? Like really, bless
Well,
their hearts."
and not
And it
only
was such a
that,
mirror.
it is such a mirror, right? God bless
Hmm.
them for showing up to show us like what we're doing to ourselves on a regular basis,
Right,
like all the
exactly.
time, all the time. So take a time out from that, all y'all. I can say that because I lived in the South for 5 minutes. All y'all. Anyway, we will call it there and let you guys play with that this week. And please visit us on our Facebook page or our LinkedIn page, The Soulful Leaders, or contact us through our website, thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com. Visit us at tslp.life. We would love to hear from you. We'll see you all next week on the Soulful Leader Podcast.
And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader Podcast with your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren and Stephanie. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.